This is where the point in my life where I began to work on a graduate degree in smoking. We had this dugout at the baseball field. We would always go report to because they had a place for us to go and get away from the crowd to smoke. And they assigned us a teacher who was a shop teacher, Mr. Quimby. Very nice guy, and of course this is where I really got to know Mr. G.H. Gavin, an inspiration too in his own right. Even though he did say praise, 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 he demanded praise, 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 and he had one of the best bands in Alabama. I don't know how, but he did. But he had married an English lady. Well, he's World War II. I think that's all he did in service was play a saxophone. And married this girl from Britain. And, but he was a master at that, even though he was the band director. He was also the assistant principal, the only assistant principal. And so that kind of goes hand in hand, doesn't it? But if you remember, maybe you don't have any reason to remember, but Alabama, you can get a degree in anything and be a principal. I mean, you don't get paid. In other words, you can be a band director, and get paid on your master's and doctorate level because you didn't know what got a doctorate. It wasn't necessary. Matter of fact, it was looked down upon in those days to be a band director and doctorate. Matter of fact, I was referred to a little story about some of the old band directors there in Alabama who there's a Dr. Hoover in Alabama that used his doctor. He just his Dr. Hoover, and a bunch of band directors called him one day. They told him one of the things they had it was appendicitis. You know, what could you do about it? So they literally looked down on that sort of thing. But that's when I kind of settled down on saxophone, and of course. I played alto for a while, and of course went to baritone, and I love the baritone sax. I loved it. I loved the bass line, the baritone line, cool. And things were getting better and better and better. And that year, my parents couldn't afford band instruments. I mean, that was a total luxury. And most of the kids in the band did have school instruments. Not everyone bought those big, expensive instruments. Although back in those days they weren't that expensive, but they were expensive for most of the people of Washington County, Alabama. So the instruments were pretty well worn too. I mean, they were in bad shape and squeak and squawk. But we turned out probably more all state band members than anybody in the state, believe it or not. That little country town, even though it was the county seat, China. But it was a dedicated band director who lived and breathed. But he was a good, and also G.H. was a good, yes, G.H. Gavin, was a good English teacher, superb. He was one time the head of the department at Livingston University. English department. And but I learned a lot from that very, very responsible and leader, because he was one. But I guess he got tired of the pay that the teachers got back in those days, $2,000 or $3,000 a year. And it's bad. For someone, 4,000 was the maximum. And around that time, band directors were just almost non-existent. Really, you get a job after a couple of years in college, easy, good jobs, good band director jobs. But there was a good solid core, good band directors in Alabama at the time too, and with a good leadership in the University of Alabama. To helping the folks was Colonel Butler. and well-known gentleman, and he pretty well led the state in the development of good band directors. Of course, Livingston got in on the job, Troy State, and Jacksonville, some of the other colleges. They were state colleges then, had gone from everything normal schools and girls normals all the way up. And as a matter of fact, Livingston University, well, it's now West Alabama University, but it was almost built in Sims Chapel, Alabama. And politics kept it out, you know. John Johnston, the same John Johnston that I'm talking about, that more or less raised my father, is the one that fought it. And remember, I said that my dad only had a 5th grade education. That would have been something for us to have had something like that there in that little place, you know. Now, I didn't mention my mother's education. She got married in the 11th grade, and so she finished her high school work with at I don't know what is the name of that school, correspondence school, American school. And by the way, I did too. I got anxious at one point. I want to get out and get a merchant marine, like my uncle did, you know, 15. So, but I kept trying to get out, and I finished middle school. I finished my high school diploma before I got finished my real one. And I guess that, and let me remind you of a teacher I had that year. His name was Mr. Harris, an alcoholic. I didn't have to question whether he was or not. I would do it for him. I'd take his. I'll let the world know about him too, because he he's from Mississippi, and go up and get drunk and hungover and not be in school on Mondays, and of course we loved having him after lunch, you know, really did. We'd have our lunch and we'd come back when we had a period where we'd go out and play some football, and come back and go to class, science class, if you want to call it that. And he'd be asleep on his desk, and we'd whisper, you know, the whole period, you know. And he'd be at that as a hornet, you know, when he'd wake up and the period was about over, you know. But he finally got fired. Came in too late one Wednesday. It's not on Monday. So the principal this time, John L. Porter, one of the finest educators ever, went ahead and taught the rest of his year for him. And he was just an outstanding teacher. I'll never forget that. He's the one that got me to thinking science, scientific terms, and it went right along with my American school classes I was taking. And they were pretty strict too, by the way, their grading. And I recall very vividly, think of something that no one has ever thought of before. And we're going to give reports on it next week. And that was a challenge. That really was a thing. Think of something no one's ever thought, you think that nobody's ever thought of before. And I thought I had it, of course. But, you know, like I figured out that there had been at one time that this old land was covered with water, you know. Down in Alabama, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Figured that out. I don't know how, but I did. And I had this whole scientific scheme, you know, how the mountains were, these mountains, I didn't know what a mountain was. Never been to a mountain before, you know. Never seen a mountain. But you know, how they were developed, and of course it turned out I was right. Somebody else had thought that before, though, long before me. But it got me to thinking, you know, originally, you know, and that's I guess the key. And began this little friendly competition we had with grades, and that's why I still approve of the grading as we have it. as we had it when I was in school up that way, and on necessity of the A honor roads and B honor roads. I mean, that's why I'm in favor of that. Gives a little competition, you know, to make you think. You know, try to. If you don't have anything to challenge, you don't have anything. You're not going to go nowhere. And that's why I today believe that problems are great. Problems are great. They really are. They can think. And problems are the invention. The mother invention. I truly believe that.